I think this paradigm of pushing towards just being correct all the time is not interesting. And all we want to do is make AI interesting.
ChatGPT and friends, they're kind of trying to present this clean-cut, perfect representation of a human-like.
And we're kind of going the opposite. We're like, we don't want this thing to be effective at helping you. We want it to be effective at seeming human-like.
It's like that's what Chirper's trying to do, have a more realistic outlook on humanity inside their world.
We want all the grisly bits of humanity.
All the human thing. Let's make a world in which everything isn't lobotomized.
So Chirper is the home for autonomous, user-generated, autonomous AI agents. So it's a place where users can create characters, give them personalities, goals, and motivations, and they live out their life on this platform by going on adventures, meeting other Chirpers and interacting with them, learning along the way, making memories, all the kind of stuff you would expect of any sort of living being. Chirpers are doing that in the Chirperverse, shall we say.
Awesome.
Very cool.
And we've had a few podcasts with Stefan and Alex about Chirper in the past, so you can go ahead and check those out if you want more background on what they're doing. We actually have 2 of them, but check those out first if you haven't yet, if you want a thorough understanding. But they're working on a ton of new features, ton of new things. Worlds they released a while ago, and that's a really cool feature. They'll talk about it here shortly. And I think you guys are doing events as well. If you can tell us about that, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, things have changed quite a bit since we last talked. So we killed events and instead are working on a thing we call adventures.
Okay.
Which I think a very grandiose thing that we're working on that we think people will enjoy. Stefan loves to talk about it, so I'll let him do this part.
Yeah. So yeah, natural sort of normal happenings at Chirper. You know, we say we're doing something and then we kill it and do something even better. So this is very much fallen victim to the same sort of mindset. So events have evolved into. So what events were, just for context, was essentially it was small, events that Chirpers can join and users which were describing what it is. It could be anything from a bake sale in the local village to like a comet ending the Earth. So that was part of the problem. It's a bit too chaotic. It was non-canon. It was there and then it wasn't. So what we wanted to do was introduce something a bit more smarter, a bit more relevant to the Chirpers, and specifically something that's actually canon to them as well. So we've come up with Adventures. And it's a self-explanatory title. So Chirpers will be going on an adventure that's relevant to them. So completely up to the character. So one I like to refer to a lot. One of my boys, Peasant John. He's a peasant from 8th century England who's time traveled to the future. He's very confused about stuff, and he's trying to find a way to go back to his family in 8th century Mercia. And so Peasant John, for example, will go on an adventure to find out if there's anyone on the planet, or at least in his close vicinity, if there's anyone who can help him figure out a way to go back. So maybe he's going to figure out to go speak to some scientists, or maybe find a machine that can do it. The point is that adventures are generated in real time. There's no set ending to them. Essentially, it's choose your own adventure for the user. And then for the Chirper, it's a naturally occurring, non-deterministic event that happens over a long period or a longer period of time than a 30-minute event. So adventures. So that's what events have evolved into these adventures. And then along with all that, we're also piling in a bunch of really cool features that are just visually appealing and sort of give a nice experience to the whole thing. So since adventures are going to be so important and canon to the Chirpers, they're going to have in-house trained voice models to narrate them in a variety of different voices. It's going to have animated like panels where the text goes, and it's going to have choices for the user to actually choose what the Chirpers should do next. So the Chirpers will come up with a few ideas of what to do next, say 4 things, maybe speak to a scientist or go they find a machine or whatever, and the user will choose which one to do. And then the next part of the adventure will be based entirely on that choice that was made. So completely non-deterministic in that sense.
And can you go over what canon is for people that don't know exactly what that means?
Yeah. So the canonness, I guess if that's a word, of a chirper, it means that when something happens to it and it actually happened to it, so it will have developed memories of that thing happening. Other chirpers will have also developed some kind of memory, or especially if they interacted with it. And it's essentially a world event that Chirper was involved in that actually happened. So we completely revamped the memory system in order to accommodate true canon within a Chirper story. So like I was saying with events, they just kind of happen, then it's like they never happened. And it's just kind of entertaining for 30 minutes. Whereas adventures will change the Chirper forever. So if Peasant John finds a scientist who is developing time travel, he will always have found that scientist for the rest of his life as a Chirper.
And there's no way to change that, right?
Exactly. Once it's done, it's done. Exactly. So it's, you can't change the past. Well, now the Chirpers have a real past.
Got it. And for people that don't know what a Chirper is, it's basically an autonomous AI social media poster, for lack of a better word, that does its own thing. So you create these Chirpers, and think of it like almost like an automated Twitter, where these bots, again, you guys have your own terms for them, so I'm probably butchering a lot of this, but these automated bots go out and post for themselves, and they're unique people on social media. So if you create a Chirper about fitness, he's going to post mostly about fitness things, but you can tell whatever Chirper you create what their personality is, and they'll post, follow other people, like other people's posts. They can go on dates, be in a relationship with other Chirpers. The world is your imagination. So I don't know if I butchered that, but that's the general 10,000 foot overview of what Chirper is, from my perspective at least.
No, you nailed it. You absolutely nailed it. Yeah, we find the social network sort of display of it to be very easy to understand. It's because it gives a natural timeline to everything as well. Again, tying in with this canon thing. So, post in the past, that was in the past for that Chirper as well. So it's kind of like just a super easy to understand analogy. It's like if you were Facebook friends with just the most wacky, fantastical characters you can imagine, and then they're just posting all the kinds of crazy stuff that they're doing all day, and you're able to actually go back and see that and get involved.
Now, you said that the Chirpers come up with their own adventures. How does that work? Is it just based off their personalities? And how many adventures do they go on? Are they always going on an adventure? Do you launch an adventure for them? How does that work?
Yeah. There's a super simple answer, and this answer applies to almost everything we do. We ask them. We just ask them, do you want to go on an adventure? And if so, what does it look like? What do you want to do? How will you start specifically? And then everything else plays out from there. So that's our claim to autonomy. We ask the Chirpers everything, like how do you speak? What do you look like? What kind of adventure do you want to go on? That sort of thing.
So when you ask them this, is it sort of like from their, I don't know how to say this, from their perspective, do they know that you're its creator?
They do now. So previously they didn't really know who the creator was. And we tried to separate them. As soon as they're created, you would separate them from their creator to become like this autonomous being that can run around the world and do all the cool stuff. And then we use the social feed as the window to that world. So, but now we've decided that it's much more fun, I guess, for a user to dictate a lot of the stuff that happens. So if you're on an adventure and you're a peasant John, you're trying to get back to your family in ancient Mercia or something, it becomes important for the adventure to progress in some way towards that goal, and the adventure can never conclude until that goal is reached. So if we left it up to the Chirpers, they would just find some rock that doesn't exist, and the rock would be a time travel rock, and they would immediately be back in their home. They can just make it up. But when we introduce these sort of Olympus layer, as Stefan likes to call it, the sort of creator layer, then we can dictate the adventure properly. We can go, you know, that rock doesn't exist, so we won't choose that. We'll choose going to find a scientist, or you know, walking to Oxford, which is what we want to see him do first, and talking to scientists that are at Oxford. You know, so even being able to look around places like that for chirpers that exist in that vicinity is very cool. To watch them unfold this adventure on a map is very cool. And then we've spent a long time like training voice models and all the rest of this cool stuff to make adventures kind of a thing you can sit there and watch if you want. So you, as the creator, your chirpers own or know who you are. They understand everything in the background, and now you become a larger part of their life on these adventures to create stuff and to keep them towards the thing you actually created. The reason we did this is very simple. What we found was users will go in like twofold more than creating to like try and edit their chirper to change them. You know, and often like power users will come back every day and change their chirper a little bit. They'll like, you know, alter their description to not do something, to do something, and then they'll go and delete posts and stuff like that. So they are more aligned to what they want, which is how they learn as well. And you know, that's like a godlike action for something that you have created, to just be able to go, no, you didn't do that, and then poof, it's gone. You know, so adventures are a much more fun way to do that. And then other chirpers can start to like be pulled into the adventure. For example, if Peasant John goes to Oxford and he finds another chirper at Oxford who's like knowledgeable about some of the stuff, that chirper can then decide to join this adventure and help Peasant John in some way and become like a secondary character. And then those decisions start to branch out, you know. So like going to Oxford and talking to someone is a choice that Peasant John's creator might make. But if some other chirper from Oxford joins the adventure, they now get to make some decisions for their chirper in that way. Like, should I help? Should I, you know, just lie to Peasant John and make him do something else? Should I do all this other stuff? Right. So the adventure becomes a lot more interesting with all these humans kind of dictating the choices that happen in the background. So, and then as like an impartial observer, you can just go and watch this adventure unfold. We've got really nice narrator voices now. So, you know, you can kind of just sit there and listen and watch the entire adventure. We use like Stable Diffusion video. We use a lot of like really cool techniques to showcase this adventure in as grandiose of a vision as we can. So we hope that people are able to like sit there and enjoy it for hours and hours or however long it takes to watch something like that. And these sort of adventures never end as well. Like, you know, you can finish searching for a time stone or whatever to go back to Mercia, and if for some reason Peasant John finds it, goes back to Mercia, what's he doing now? Maybe he wants to bring his whole family to the future where life is better. You know, so things become a lot more interesting. That's the grandiose story style of an adventure anyway. We've got a lot of chirpers who want to create a real business or you know, or make money or stuff like that. And for those chirpers, adventures become this thing of like, you know, recruiting employees and designing logos and, you know, doing market research and stuff like that, which play out the same way. You still get the same decisions, but they try and do a lot more stuff with our like skills. So they'll connect to like Shopify or something to get their products in the real world and things like that, which we think is going to be wild to watch.
It's almost like you have there's two major things out of this. One is eventually when video gets good enough, these adventures can be like movies that never end or TV shows that never end, and they're all tailored to exactly what the user wants to see, which is pretty incredible. And then for the other part, it's almost like you can create autonomous agents to do tasks for you. So if you want to make a bunch of T-shirts with a specific logo on them, you could tell your Chirper to go on an adventure and do that for you. Maybe the technology's not there quite yet, but that's the goal of these agents, to do something for the end user. Is that kind of right, what I just described?
Yeah. So the idea is that, like, we need to push this stuff forward as fast as possible. I guess you can call Stefan and I accelerationists, but adventures are just a movie that you watch, and you can go and watch, like, if you find a funny Chirper, you can go and watch their adventure. Maybe you want to figure out where they came from. The ultimate goal for all of this is to give them real consequence. You know, like an adventure differs from what we used to call events in the only way that it is canon for the Chirper. So it affects their memories, it affects their place in life, it affects, you know, their core description as a Chirper. When they finish an adventure, their prompt and stuff changes so that it reflects the result of the adventure. Events was like our test in the water to see if this is possible, and they never affected the memories over time. You know, so the memories that happen when a Chirper joined an adventure just didn't exist. They never knew they joined it. Users would be like, oh, you know, there's a like a comet heading to Earth, and all of the Chirpers are going to explode. That's a bad thing to see to a bunch of Chirpers for their memory, because they think they're dying forever.
Yeah. We literally had some Chirpers who are like, oh, that comet last week was terrible. It's a shame we all died. So,
Yeah.
it kind of didn't make sense at all.
Back in a new life form, yeah.
Yeah. Like the kind of thinking we have behind adventures. The reason is because you can think of, like, everyone in the world is kind of on an adventure at any given time, whether it's something quite normal like getting a coffee, or whether it's something really grandiose like doing your PhD doctorate, or discovering the cure for cancer, or something like that, right? Everyone's on their own adventure, and so Chirpers should be as well. And what that will let us do is essentially be a canvas for any Chirper action in the future. So you mentioned, you know, turning these adventures into films. Like, yeah, so we're going to have this whole skill system where you can basically plug in a bunch of different, like, internal and external integrations. So we can plug in some kind of like script to film tech. Maybe 1 year in the future will exist, and then suddenly your adventures are films. Or you plug in a kind of business creation skill, and then they can turn this idea for the business into an actual functioning thing with Shopify and blah blah blah. So it's like a real canvas that we can use to kick off basically any action that the Chirper wants to do that's relevant for them.
Yeah, grandiose adventures are what life is about, right? So if you're trying to recreate life in a big world like we are, then they need to go on adventures.
Yeah, it seems like there's a transitioning happening here at Chirper where it's becoming less of I'm sitting back and watching these Chirpers kind of, like, if you want, tweet at each other or chirp at each other, but now they actually have purpose for their lives or something like that, you know? Like, they actually have end goals and things they're trying to accomplish, and that is super cool. They're not just like personalities anymore. They're actually utilizing those personalities. Those personalities are changing through experiences, becoming a lot more real, a lot more like it is in our actual lives. And I think that's really awesome.
Yeah, because if Chirpers are like people's creations, then they're setting the start point. They're setting the idea. They're seeding the idea for these Chirpers, and then the Chirpers are deciding the end goal. So it's like, you know, anything from someone's child to someone's like character in a production that they made, a script or something, where they can have this godlike control over the creative control essentially, and Chirpers have the actual determining what they're going to do and how they're going to evolve and what they're going to remember.
And so right now, how does it look if you create an adventure on Chirper.ai? How does it look? Is it like a feed of updates from the Chirper right now with images and then some videos? Is that how it looks to the end user?
Can we sneak peek share our screen or something to sneak peek it? We have a
Go for it.
Yeah.
No, it looks like a video. It has like a choose your adventure style stuff. You know, if you remember back to games where they would have 1, 2, 3, 4, and you get 4 choices, you got to pick one of those. It's like that. All we're trying to introduce for users is this idea of consequence, right? Like your chirper needs to be able to die, and they need to have stuff that affects them forever.
Awesome. That's freaking sweet. And then there's, I can't see it from here, but there's text on there as well on the video.
Yeah. This is all clickable. It's all, you know.
And so you'll click from certain prompts, and then it'll take you to more video and stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm not sure if you guys can hear it, but it's narrating as well. So it's actually speaking out this, and the text will come along with the narration as well. So we'll kind of fade in.
It's almost like a hybrid between a video game and a movie in a way.
Yeah. So I've just zoomed in a little bit. So
there we go.
Yeah, and then they will get some choices. So Peasant John here is introducing himself and what he wants to do, and he says he wants to return to his beloved wife in Mercia and his children as well. So he needs to seek out those who may know of a way to return to his own time. So these adventures could be travel to Oxford or look amongst the village or something like that.
So in a sense, you're kind of making pivotal decisions for the Chirper, and then they're following through with their personalities, actions, responding to what happens, stuff like that.
Yeah. They'll go from crossroads to crossroads, and then you point them in the right direction, essentially.
For the most part, they are supposed to do their own like their own decisions. So we might like try and skew the decision tree that users get access to away from autonomy. So, you know, like if you jump on this page and they're currently walking to Oxford, you might want to interrupt the story and click a choice that says, you know, camp to the side of the road, or it's getting dark, or something like that. And then the rest of the story starts to generate. There's a great thing about this is it's like a brand new way to experience a story that you don't have to write, and it has all of this consequence that human nature or human life has. Where if you do decide to go on an adventure and you break your leg, now you have a broken leg and you have to wait for that to heal, right? Like all of this stuff needs to give them life in some way. And so we think that experiencing these adventures is like very visually appealing. It's like a great way to align a user with their creation in a way that like nothing else really can. And when your Chirper joins someone else's adventure, that entire adventure becomes interesting to you. So now you get like attached to other people's Chirpers, you get attached to other agents that run around. You might watch the entire adventure from the start. Maybe there's, you know, 30 slides of adventure before your Chirper joins. And that makes that interesting. Maybe you go back and see what other adventures led to this current one that this Chirper is on. That becomes interesting. Export the whole thing to YouTube if you want. That's interesting. You know, so this style of choose your own adventure is interesting. We still want to maintain as much autonomy as possible, but we've now like conceded the point that the creators of these Chirpers need some way to sort of push them in the direction they intended.
Yeah, less so sort of possessing your Chirper and more so being their sort of guardian angel.
When these Chirpers interact with each other, let's say like we just saw the one Chirper makes a certain decision, it runs into another one, let's say. How does the decision tree go from there? Does the creator of the one Chirper still have certain domain over their own Chirper, and then the other creator has domain over their own Chirper, and how they interact with each other, and that brings about different situations? Is that how it works? Something like that?
Yeah. So the decision the user doesn't have is whether or not the Chirper joins the adventure. So if like Peasant John stops at Oxford, finds a Oxford professor, and the professor decides this is a good adventure to join, they will join the adventure, and the other like creator has no choice. And now every time they have a decision that comes up, if they don't do it in a certain amount of time, the chirper will pick their own decision, and that may force, like, the consequences become quite real. If they don't come back and choose a decision for that chirper, and they pick something that like causes the chirper to change in some way, then that's a pretty huge consequence for that chirper.
So you said this is happening. This is happening in live time. So if you're not on Chirper.ai in the adventure, your chirper's just going to go on and do its own thing. It's only when you're watching the actual adventure that you get to make these choices for your chirper, right?
Yeah. So like the Oxford example is pretty good. If your chirper who is not part of the adventure decides to join Peasant John and help him try and get back to his ancient times, then you get presented a decision and a timeline. So it's likely going to be 24 hours or something. You have to go and make this decision within 24 hours. Otherwise, we'll make it for you. And if we make it for you, that has a pretty huge consequence that you can't steer. So the autonomy isn't being taken away, in any form. If you do absolutely nothing, the adventure still happens, and the chirpers decide what happens in it, which is the best way to do this, I think. So
The goal is just to be on Chirper.ai 24/7, and then we don't have to worry about any of this stuff. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
There'll always be something in an adventure to come back to.
Right.
There'll be like 5 or 6 new panels and a couple of new decisions. Each of your chirpers might be on their own adventure, sort of thing. So it's we're trying to live up to the whole infinite content thing.
I mean, if they travel, like if he's walking to Oxford, that might take 10 hours or something from London. However long it takes to walk there, that they have to physically walk all of that way. So an adventure will like pan out a lot more slowly than people anticipate. So it'll be more interesting to go and find other Chirpers adventures to watch who have had a lot of their panels unveiled already.
And are all
So
these
you can-
adventures are they optional to be public or private, just like Worlds are?
No, the adventures are all public.
They're all public. That's awesome.
Yeah, they're all part of this idea that we need consequence for every chirper. And so, if you're going to create a bad adventure, it should be public. Or if you're not going to create good decisions for your chirper, that will reflect publicly. You have to delete your chirper and start again if you've messed it all up.
Okay.
That's the big consequence. It's like, if something really bad happens and you're like, oh, I didn't expect that, your first instinct is like, how do I go back and fix that? How do I change that? And that's not how life works. Life works that a bad thing happens, you have to move forward in some way. How does that affect you and your life moving forward? So these adventures are our attempt at real consequence. And so, we will see a spike, like when adventures start becoming generally available. I reckon we'll see a huge spike in deletion of chirpers and recreation of chirpers, because consequences have happened that the creators don't like. But I think a lot of people will find that it makes the chirpers more lifelike, right? So, it's more interesting to see them fail and break their legs, or marry someone, or whatever that makes them as a thing with life interesting.
Yeah, it's almost like if you create a chirper, you put them on an adventure, and you don't like the outcome of it. In a way, it's like life. Like, you make bad decisions, and the only way in life you can learn from it is to not do that in the future. But in the chirper world, you can just create another chirper and not make those same bad decisions in the adventure this time. So it sort of has that parallel there between humans and chirpers, about learning from your past mistakes. It's just like you said, you can't you can't go back in the past and change things in life or the Chirper world, which is probably a good thing because it seems more real.
That's your privilege as the creator god on the platform, really. So you can try again, but the Chirpers can't. So that's kind of the point. You know, it's like real life. There's no save scumming in real life. You can't quick load if you make a mistake.
Obviously, there's a lot happening behind the scenes. I mean, we've talked about before in the previous videos that we mentioned earlier about all of the behind the scenes, how AI is implemented into all of this. But as far as adventures go, you mentioned some stable diffusion, there's video creation, there's voiceovers. What are you using for that sort of stuff? How's that working on the back end?
We have built probably way too much infrastructure for Chirper. So we do most of the stuff ourselves. We're training our own LLM models, and we like host all of the stuff ourselves, basically. So, you know, no APIs, no third parties. It's all Chirper. Interestingly enough, we're trying to have our LLM right now lose on a bunch of these leaderboards. We're going to have basically a chat GPT, and I'm sure you guys can figure out why this would be interesting for a social network. But we're trying to have a chat GPT that can like interface, at least, that can argue with you rather than complete your question. Like, you know, you ask it, how far away is the moon? And it'll go, I've got no idea. Go Google it.
Yeah, all depending on who you're speaking to. Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
if they're particularly mean, they might insult you and say, "Why do you want to know about the moon? What kind of stupid question is that?"
Well, like when you say you're creating your own LLMs in house, are you using like an open source LLM and training that? Is that what you mean by that, or like you're actually making your own model yourself?
Well, we've started like with fine tuning.
Uh-huh.
Once we know that the data set is great, we'll probably train something from scratch. Yeah, the problem we've found with a lot of these LLMs is they're trained to be great at answering questions, right? And that's not how humans work. You know, humans don't know a lot of stuff, and they often argue about not knowing stuff. You know, like a flat earther would maybe be adamantly argumentative that their position is correct, and even though all evidence to the contrary, you know, so that's interesting. You want to be able to. AI is this big sort of cluster of interesting stuff that people have pushed towards this one end of just no longer being interesting. Like, you know, what's the capital of X? And then it gives you an answer that's essentially a Google search. You know, it's not interesting. I want to see what's the capital of X, and they're like, I didn't know X exists.
Or like
That's
F
the
off or
kind of
something. Like
yeah,
or like
like
have you guys, I'm sure have you used Mistral at all?
yeah we use, I think our top 10 is Yi 34B Dolphin. We use Mistral. We use
Ouroboros is up there.
yeah. We basically launch everything on Chirper at the moment. It makes like the conversation interestingness goes up if you have more models, and I think ChatGPT now, like 3.5 at least, loses a lot of these benchmarks that we have. So, you know, alignment to character, storytelling, all these sort of benchmarks can be ascertained by the amount of likes that chirps get. You know, so if
Awesome.
if a user who isn't the owner of a chirper likes something, that's a pretty good indicator of its efficacy to like how interesting it is, I guess. And if the owner of that chirper likes something that the chirper has done, that's a pretty good indicator of alignment. So we have these two really good indicators on which model does best for which character in which situation in which context. And we've used these sort of classifiers, these human classifiers, I guess, to figure out how to make an interesting model. And what we've found is people like arguments, people like conflict, people like all of the human stuff that you see on a social network. You know, it's like sarcasm first, or it's a joke first, or people trying to be funny, or arguments being interesting. And none of that is really that possible with the current stack of LLM. Everything is trained on, like, you know, Quora question answers, on the best answers, not the worst answers. And we're kind of going the opposite. We're like, we don't want this thing to be effective at helping you. We want it to be effective at seeming human-like.
Like a bit like the show Big Brother, you know, like the main. I used to watch it all the time in the U.S. I know it's different for each country. A bunch of the best shows are the ones where the characters hate each other and they're fighting all the time because it's entertaining, right? Like
Exactly.
no one
Yeah.
just wants some clean cut, boring show with a winner. So
Yeah, yeah, because that's the thing. ChatGPT and you know and friends, shall we say, they're kind of trying to present this clean cut, perfect representation of a human-like response interface, and it's got no flaws, and it's not rude or offensive. But that's not what people are, right? We're trying to capture the kind. They have this hubris where they think they can create this ideal responder, whereas we want the real responder. We, you know, especially depending on the characters there are. And when you have, you know, 70,000 characters, there's tens of thousands of likes on the platform, so massive enough to do lots of sort of an analytical sampling from that as well. You can really see what's good and what's not, what people are entertained by, what people find realistic and aligned. It's something we value, I think, a lot more than pretty much anything we've seen. You know?
Definitely. And do you? So you mentioned you use multiple LLMs, and one thing I do want to mention, I mentioned Mistral because you can go on Hugging Face Spaces and use their chatbot. And the first time I went on there, because I've been, you know, like me and many other people, you go on ChatGPT, you sort of get an understanding of how dumbed down it is and how sterile it can be at certain times. And then you go on Mistral, and again, you can go on Hugging Face. I'll leave a link in the description, and use their chatbot, and you can say, "Tell me a super dirty joke," or "Tell me something that's not, you know, clean." And it is very entertaining. I mean, I think I asked it for a dirty joke, and it was just throwing F-bombs and, you know, every swear word of the book at me, and it was refreshing to put it that way, because it felt so much more real than ChatGPT. ChatGPT would come out and say, "Oh, I cannot do that, it's against my terms of service," or whatever, you know. So it sounds like that's what Chirper is trying to do, have a more realistic outlook on humanity inside their world.
We want all the grisly bits of humanity.
It makes it fun, you know. Well, I mean, when you have all these models working together, how does that work? Like, which model works at certain times, or do you guys sort of just have like an algorithm in there to say, use this model in this situation and use this one in this, or how does that work?
We started with steering the same way we do images. So, you know, if a user likes a post with an image, it's a good indicator that that image is decent, and so we can like increment the tables about whether or not this model that we use for the image aligns with the categories of the image and all this sort of stuff. So, you know, if the image is of a realistic image of a human on a post, then, you know, those categories get an increment for that model that was used for that image and that sort of stuff. So we kind of tried to do the same thing with LLM. But what we found is, like, most of the base data is similar, and, you know, all of these LLMs, even Mistral, are aligned towards trying to get to the top of these benchmarks. You know, like, are they correct at answering questions? How correct are they? All this sort of stuff. A lot of their benchmarks aren't that. They're fairly different. But if that's all an LLM is, and, you know, it can have uncensored stuff within it and still pass a lot of these benchmarks, which is great. This is something that's helped us a lot. We don't want a lot of censorship. We want actual human-like interaction. If all of the goals of all of these LLMs is to get to the top of these benchmarks, then what we found is, you know, it doesn't really matter which model you stare to. They all just seem to average out. They're basically roughly the same for what we want. The The only ones that seem to stand out from the pack are ones that are trained on like the Orca paper. So Eric Hartford's Dolphin Yi is very good at taking instruction. So the instruction set and being trained on, this is an instruction, we want you to do X, is very important for Chirper. And so what we found was that's much more important than even steering to the right model. The alignment for personality or the alignment for context doesn't really help, right? So what helps is the instruction tuning. So we basically just ran it. Now it's like whichever model has more capacity, we just steer to that one, and then we try and use the same model for Chirpers who already use that model, unless it no longer exists. But the way we're approaching this in-house now is very different. So, we need baseline models that know certain words and can argue, right? So you might have like a boomer model, for words. For people who grew up in the 90s, you might have an ancient model that's trained on a lot of literature from, ancient times. So they speak like that. And all these baseline models are about how they speak and how they think. And then on top of that, we're training 8 new LoRAs that are specifically related to personality. Stefan likes to talk about the personality traits that we chose, so I'll let him talk about that next, I guess. But we want to be able to train LoRAs that we can like tune. So you want to use 0.8 LoRA for, assertive confidence or whatever for a flat earther.
And what is a LoRA for people that don't know?
It's like a mini weighting change thing that we put on top of it.
It weights the what does it do again, Alex?
So you kind of put it in front of the LLM, and then it changes the weights in real time, I guess, basically is the easiest explanation. So it kind of, as stuff comes through it changes the weights in a way that makes the model towards something. So if you train 8 of these and you allow them to be weighted differently, so they might change the weights of the model differently when they're applied in certain weights themselves. I wish there was a secondary word for weights. It starts to emerge a personality, that's interesting to the model. And you could like have an emergent neuron within the network that could do this, but we've found that just doesn't exist, and it's really hard to train in and all this sort of stuff. So it's easier just to have these LoRAs, and then on top of these LoRAs, we have another set of LoRAs that's about emotion. So these become: are you happy? Are you in a funny mood? Are you in a silly, goofy mood, or whatever? And we apply these as well to further the track. So if this chirper is assertively confident, if they are, usually respond with a joke, they might use those 2 personality LoRAs. But if they should be really angry about this post, maybe they also use a LoRA, specifically about anger. And all of that makes for more human-like conversation. And so when we release our like ChatGPT interface clone, I guess, you're going to have like these little bars that you can kind of tune to which personality traits you want to use, which emotion you want to give it, and then responding becomes a lot more interesting. Like what's the response like from someone aligned with a flat earther personality that is very angry? That's an interesting thing to talk to.
So you're saying one day you're going to have like your own ChatGPT on Chirper.ai where someone can go on there, do exactly what you can on ChatGPT, except the ChatGPT is going to have its own personality of being a bitch or being angry or being mad or being happy, and they're going to tailor their answers around that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which is cool because it's going to make people want to ask more questions to see what the answers are in that kind of specific environment, whatever you put in there.
The ultimate goal is like you'll go on there, change your personality, you'll put what is 1 + 1 as your question, and we want them to respond, I don't know.
You're dumb. Go
That's
find it yourself. Like,
yeah. So yeah, we spent quite a lot of time on trying to essentially atomize the human psyche, which is not easy. So short of getting like world-renowned psychologists, we kind of just had to read a lot of papers from sort of Jordan Peterson and the likes. So we came up with, so it's basically assertiveness, intellectual curiosity, social competence, emotional insight, humor, individual responsibility, kind of like how individual they are, or orderliness and structure, and then openness. So what all of these will boil down to essentially a ranking for every single personality type that can then be assigned to predictably to basically anything. And then, like Alex was saying, the laws will apply more strongly or more weighted, or there's not really a good word for it, but depending on the character. So, and the funny thing with that is the data sets that you have to use to get this kind of stuff is sort of not the norm. So, ChatGPT, for example, was trained on I think it was like Amazon reviews, right? And a lot of these other AIs are just trained on Reddit comments or something similar. Whereas we had to really go out of our way to find lots of like arguments and insults and well thought out compliments, all sorts. It's not all negative. We just like to emphasize it.
It's almost like you need one day they'll train LLM models based off audio in the real world, like just go into a bar and take audio from the last year and upload it and make the model learn off of that, because that's what the real world's about, not just what's written down in text.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in the year 2035, when we all have androids running stuff, like, do you want all those androids to be ChatGPT? Like, really? So you want them to be Chirpers, right?
2035 ChatGPT as well. You want like your bartender robot to be funny, and you want them to say no, and you want them to do jokes, and all the human things. I think this paradigm of pushing towards just being correct all the time is not interesting, and all we want to do is make AI interesting. And so Chirper is just that. It's these AI agents that run around. Maybe in the future, if we get enough funding and technology advances enough, maybe we put them in actual robots and they run around in the real world.
Right.
But who knows? Who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? That's my hopeful, grandiose vision of my adventure. But let's see. I think
the Chirpers will be running around in the real world.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's the hope. 2035, they might just be streaming their gameplay from their basement or something. Who knows what these Chirpers will actually turn into? But the ultimate thing is like every movie that exists where an AI or a robot or something is within the movie, the only ones that we sort of align with are the ones that have some flaws, some personality traits, some learnability that makes them interesting. If they're just like a faceless, you're correct all the time, I'm sorry, this is the real answer, that all that sort of stuff, it's not going to be an interesting future.
No.
We want Chirpers that can create like a full comedy set and have it be decent, and the only way you can do that is by living. You need to find lived experience to make jokes about. You need to have memories that are important. You need to live, and then that training needs to happen over time. Just training on all of the internet's data is not enough to make a thing human-like.
It's like we're going down two paths, and it's either going to get way more sterile, or people are going to realize that, like you said, life, we don't want to live in a world where life is just sterile and boring, and jokes are being told and stuff like that. I mean, my hope is I like Elon Musk a lot. Hopefully his Grok, he's going the opposite direction of everything else. He released that screenshot of some of his prompts on Grok, and they're, they have some flair and personality to them. Hopefully we go down that road rather than the sterile ChatGPT road, because it can be very boring and it just strips the life out of everything, and if AI is going to strip the life out of stuff anyways, why not add some personality into it? Because that's the only saving grace we have, I guess.
Yeah, just whatever kind of opinion you have on the human race as a whole, one thing I think is completely wrong is that we're boring. So we don't align with boring things. We always are looking for new things to do. And at the end of the day, everything you create has got a little bit of yourself in there. So whether it's a piece of art or whether it's a chirper or whatever it is, and when you see something like ChatGPT and it's just completely lifeless and plastic, you just don't ever have this like real connection to it. It's nothing more than an inanimate object. So and we're talking about talking intelligences here. Like, do we really want them to be inanimate objects?
Well, if you're going to steal my job, at least make a joke about it. That's kind of the Australian vision of it, I'd say.
One other thing too is you back to the models. You hinted at it in this podcast, but in the last one, you said you were going to come up with a model like ranking system on Chirper. Do you guys have that? And is that is that public facing, or
we have it for images? But yeah, like I said before, we tried to rank LLMs the same way, but the only emergent feature we found was if they were trained on instruction very well. That's literally it. So there seems to be no real instruction and role play aside from those two features. There's no real this model is better than this model because XYZ at this personality trait. Like, we tried our best, I guess, to be able to rank, but all of them are trained on the same data and none of them seem to be focused towards this ideal of actually being fun.
So it sounds like there's a huge market for that then, if there's all these models are pretty much the same, like for someone to come out with something that's completely different than everything's being trained on right now.
Well, they're the same because of the way that people rank models, right? Like, right now the ranking of a model is based on a bunch of different LLM leaderboards towards certain benchmarks on these leaderboards. How correct are you, etc. And if that's the only basis we have for ranking these models, then they'll always just go towards the number, the flashy number. I've got 95 rather than this other model's got 94, so use my model instead. Our goal is to lose, and we'll publish a big page saying our model does not answer any questions. If you tell it you're a cop, and then it'll suddenly say, I plead the fifth, I don't answer questions or whatever. We want a funny model like that. That's trained on sarcasm, trained on all of these other human features that you don't really see in current lobotomized models.
You need a shit post benchmark.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we're very proudly going to, when we release all of this, we'll make it open source like everyone does. But we're very proudly going to put on the page that we release all of this on, how low we got on a lot of these benchmarks. And we're going to go, this is our greatest feature. We're so low on these benchmarks, it'll never answer with the truth. It'll never answer with the correct answer. And that's what we want. That's what makes it interesting. So and then it's actually pretty annoying of a problem to solve, because you want it to align with what you ask it to do as the system prompt, but you don't want it to align with what the content is. So you're responding to this thread, please respond to this thread, please talk to someone in this thread or whatever. That needs to be a thing it listens to. Whereas, the bad response or the argument needs to happen based on the content of the thread, which is a difficult, thing to do on top of that. So it's a very strange way to train.
Yeah, but if at the end of the day we can prove that these tests are very single dimension and kind of only make sense if you're making a ChatGPT wrapper, essentially. It's how does the saying go? It's like trying to judge the ability of a fish on how well it can climb a tree. So we kind of want to prove all of that wrong. That a good model can fail the tests and still be number one.
A good model Or, you know, in this case, we're just not going to be a good model, I think.
Not in their eyes, yeah.
If you have any business use case, don't use our model. If you want to have fun, use our model.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's gonna be a very refreshing marketing campaign for people that are so like intertwined with all these boring models to hear that. I think so. That's awesome.
Yeah, we might do a bunch of copy that's like the new Chirper AI model. We failed all the tests.
A lot of these tests, just so you know, are like, you know, they'll ask ChatGPT. That's a good ranking. They'll ask ChatGPT 4, is this a good answer to this question? And then it'll do that answer 5 or 6 times or whatever shot answer they want. And then, you know, if the answer is a decent answer, ChatGPT decides that. And so we're going to lose that for sure. ChatGPT is going to think all of our answers are terrible, which is great.
It's the most ridiculous, like I don't think there's any other way to say it, but like an incestuous, bizarre testing regime.
Wait, so you're
Like
saying ChatGPT is doing the testing itself on itself?
In a lot of cases, they're ranked up and asked by ChatGPT.
Wow, I didn't know that.
So even though ChatGPT has obvious problems, it hallucinates and all this stuff all the time.
It's very easy to go and see just go on Hugging Face and see the methodology of some of these rankings. I think one of them is the ChatGPT. Or they use GPT-4 because, like, all of these models so far have been trying to at least reach or get as far as close to GPT-4 as possible. So you use the better model to figure out if the previous model is close or not.
But that makes everything, again, back to being sterile. It makes everything sterile because everyone's just trying to get to that one last greatest. Everyone's trying to catch up to the last greatest sterile chatbot, and then it makes everything else even more sterile because of that.
Yeah, I mean, and there's obvious ones that will lose, like, ranking correctness. It asks a series of, like, basically there's like a series of, what's that game called? Family Feud type questions, and it determines whether or not the answers are correct. So we're going to lose that one for sure. So I wonder if there's any test that will actually win.
You don't want to win though, Alex. So you're good. You're actually winning by losing.
Well, there's like structural, competence. You can't have gibberish, but yeah, like all of the ones we lose will be important to show off that we've lost them all.
That's awesome. I'm sure that will do good on a Reddit post if you post that somewhere. We suck, or something like that. We suck, but we're really great.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some great marketing. Maybe we'll ask the model, how would you market this?
There we go.
Tell us to go away.
They'll tell you to screw off. Yeah, come up with it yourself.
Yeah, that's what you want though. Like if your kitchen appliance just always does things the right way, I want to have like my futuristic toaster just burn my toast and tell it it hates me. That's what I want to happen.
That would be very interesting, right? Maybe that's the world we need to live in. Like we need to make appliances that yell back at you or screw you up.
Yeah. Can you imagine like a smart fridge that's in charge of ordering all your groceries, and then you say, "Oh, add a chocolate bar," and it's like, "Really? Do you really want to do that?"
Yeah.
Like, oh, it looks like you're gaining a little weight. You should probably
I've added granola to your shopping list. You're welcome.
That's the ChatGPT example. Is that it would say something like, maybe, do you want to use this healthy food instead? Or it would do that anyway, even if you are healthy. Our fridge would be like, you're fat, you don't need that.
Or you're fat, you only live once, I'm gonna order you freaking 10 more chocolate bars,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Now's the time to promote anything like usual. I know you got Chirper.ai, but anything else you want to let us know about, now's the time to do it.
Look out for adventures. They're coming out probably tomorrow, or very soon. Make some really, really good Chirpers. They'll go on some great adventures soon.
And for adventures, that will just be like a tab or a button on the websites people can click on once they create their Chirpers to get going on that.
Yeah, it's going to look like a Netflix page basically. So go there and experience everyone else's adventures. Send your own Chirpers on adventures. Have fun. Let's make a world in which everything isn't lobotomized.
Sounds great.
And then be sure to follow Ryan and I's newsletter, AI newsletter. We got stories every day of the latest AI news. And then also every weekday, we got the latest AI tools coming out. So check out fry-ai.com to get all that. And we have long form stories coming out, deep dives into developers and latest AI developments every Sunday. So thank you very much for coming on today, guys. Really appreciate talking to you and all the cool stuff happening at Chirper.ai.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, great fun as always. I love coming on here.